Hello, this is Joe Simhart with another edition of Cults in the Occult Culture. For this topic, we're going to be concentrating on this guy, the full moon, and the title will be Moon Fullery. When I was a kid, around 5-6 years old, I had a friend my age, and we went out in the backyard, and the neighbor's yard seemed to have the moon above it. And it was full, and it seemed very close. So we got this idea in our heads that we would get stones and hit the moon, and we started throwing stones at the moon. Well, the neighbor, Mrs. Bernhardt, came out and yelled at us and told us to stop throwing stones in her yard, and we ran in the house, and that was the end of that. So what was happening? Our perceptions were off. We had an emotional reaction that we could do something about the moon hanging there in the sky, and so it went. So that's a simple example of a correlation illusion or illusory correlation. Our perceptions were off. We made a wrong correlation that we could hit the moon with a stone, right? So what I want to go over are the facts behind the moon effect. In this hospital where I work, Montgomery County Emergency Service, I noticed 20 years ago that there was a persistent belief among nurses and staff and also policemen that came to the hospital that the moon affected the activity of mentally ill people, and there would be more activity, etc., more admissions to the hospital during full moon periods. So I understood astrology at the time, and I knew that astrologers believed that the full moon effect is actually 3 days long, the day before, the day of, and the day after a full moon. So I ran a study looking at 2 to 3 years of admissions and the admission rates to the hospital at the full moon and the day before and the day of the full moon to see if there was any significant difference in admission activity. And lo and behold, the statistics bore out that just about any day over that period of time, the average was about 8.1 admissions, varying within reason, just maybe a tenth of a point here and there on certain days. But the moon did not significantly affect admissions to a hospital. So other studies have been done to show that, and for instance, in this article, How Does a Full Moon Affect Our Physical and Mental Well-Being? Studies shown that, for example, menstrual cycles, they looked at a small sample of 74 females through 980 periods, and they found that on the subject of human reproductive cycles, it may comfort you to know that a full moon isn't going to send you into a sudden delivery. And they found no association between lunar phases and the onset, duration, or ending of menstrual cycles. People still believe it, however. So, in literature, the moon and in culture, the moon is valuable. It's an asset to mythology. In ancient Babylonian culture, the earliest astrology was moon-centered and not sun-centered. We have Shakespeare here in Othello stating, "It is the very error of the moon. She comes more near the earth than she was wont, and makes men mad." So this is called the lunacy effect, or the Transylvania effect, and it was persistent in Europe through the Middle Ages with the idea that the moon could cause people to change into werewolves or vampires. And we still have lots of fun with that, and plenty of movies and films and stories about that effect. So in this magazine, the Skeptical Inquirer, 1979, there's an article here on the moon and the maternity ward, and it's by George Abell and Bennett Greenspan. And in here they come to a conclusion that says, in our analysis of nearly 12,000 live and dead births occurring at the UCLA Hospital maternity ward in an interval of 51 lunar months from 1974 to 1978 reveals no correlation between the numbers of births and and full moon and any other phase of the moon. So, you know, when you crunch the numbers, the full moon effect seems to go away. So it's basically psychological. It's based on belief and maybe overvalued beliefs that people have. I mean, some companies have bought into this, and for instance, they'll bring in more workers during a full moon thinking there's going to be more activity in the hospital or other, and essentially they're just wasting money. So in another article about bipolar disorder in the moon, now there is some correlation there, they've seen this, that there's a slight change, just a slight change in cardiovascular conditions during a full moon. But also all sorts of things can cause your cardiovascular system to shift. So the moon isn't the only culprit in that. And, you know, in bipolar disorders, for instance, it shows with some people that they might become a little more manic during a full moon phase, but this doesn't mean that it's unmanageable, what they're experiencing, and makes them crazy and need to go to a hospital. So, yeah, there is some correlation. But some of the science behind it shows that the moon, even though it affects the tides considerably, does not necessarily affect us. Because of our size. So in this particular skeptical Inquirer, Moon Myths and the Lunar Effect, they studied this idea of the moon, and the title of the article is "The Moon Was Full and Nothing Happened, a review of studies on the moon and human behavior and lunar beliefs" by I.W. Kelly, James Rotton, and George Culver. And so, you know, one of the misconceptions they look at is, given the moon's obvious effects upon ocean tides, it is not surprising that scholars as well as students have jumped to the conclusion that it might also affect people's behavior. If the moon can do that to oceans, our students say, imagine what it can do to us. In a similar vein, Lieber advocates a biological tide hypothesis. So, but they find that just because the moon affects the tides, it doesn't really affect us that much. And they have this illustration here based on a study, a long study, and it's of a hospital and looking at the full moon effect on births and so forth. So when you crunch the numbers, you see that if you assign the moon's tidal force a unit of 1, okay, 1 unit, we look at the doctor that's with the birth and the tidal force that the doctor has on the baby, we find that it's 2 million units, not just 1 unit, but 2 million units. And the mother's tidal force is 12 million units. So 12 million to 1, I mean, this is what we're dealing with here. The hospital's tidal force is 7 million units. So the force of gravity and influence of tidal force within the mass of the hospital, the mass of the mother is far, far greater than the moon. It's kind of called the mosquito effect, that the moon affects us as much as a mosquito on our skin, hardly at all as far as physical tidal effect. So the beliefs are persistent. I mean, I continue to hear them today. Police officers telling me it must be a full moon, we're really busy, and I look at the calendar and I see it's a 3/4 moon, right? You know, or it's a full moon on Friday, we better really get ready. And of course, Friday comes and sometimes it's a dud, there's nothing happening. So I just wanted to bring up some facts about the moon. People continue to believe what they want to believe, but when you crunch the numbers, the full moon effect is a lot of foolery, and try not to be fooled. Thank you very much.